Brian Flores is taking a stand against the NFL. The former Miami Dolphins head coach recently slapped the league with a bombshell lawsuit, a class action complaint that alleges discrimination in its hiring practices and contends that the NFL remains rife with racism, particularly when it comes to the hiring and retention of black head coaches, coordinators, and general managers. In the 58-page suit, which also lists the Dolphins, Giants, and Broncos as co-defendants, Flores says he was fired in Miami for refusing to tank, and that his race played a critical role in that termination decision. He also says the Giants then subjected him to a sham interview for their head coaching position for the sole purpose of satisfying the Rooney Rule. There's a lot to break down here, but we got you covered. So sit back, relax, and take this in. Let's go back for a second. The Dolphins were a mess when Flores took over as head coach in 2019. A rudderless organization that had made the playoffs once in the previous decade. And while they sputtered in Flores' first season, finishing with an abysmal 5-11 record, the 2020 campaign looked like the dawning of a new era in Miami as the Dolphins finished 10-6 with rookie quarterback Tua Tagovailoa under center. This year, despite losing Tua for a quarter of the season with a rib injury, the Dolphins still managed a winning record and remained in the playoff hunt until the penultimate week of the regular season. And though their playoff drought ultimately continued, Flores had guided the team to their first consecutive winning seasons since 2003. Yet, just a day after their season-ending victory over the Patriots, Flores was fired. Why? Well, according to Flores' lawsuit, the Dolphins were miffed that he refused to tank back in 2019, a directive that Flores says came directly from team owner Stephen Ross, who allegedly offered the head coach $100,000 for every loss. Then, that offseason, Flores says he was asked and refused on numerous occasions to violate the league's tampering rules to recruit a prominent quarterback, again at the behest of Ross. From then on, Flores alleges, he was treated with disdain and ostracized within the organization before ultimately being fired in the wake of a second straight winning season. And this right here is one of the key claims at the heart of his lawsuit, that Flores, a manifestation of the angry black man trope, was fired for having the moral conviction that a white head coach would be valorized for. There's more though. After being fired by the Dolphins, Flores says he was granted a sham interview for the New York Giants' vacant head coaching gig, a position he believes he never actually had a shot at despite his obvious qualifications. He claims he was only given that interview so the Giants were in compliance with the Rooney Rule, the policy implemented in 2003 that requires teams to interview minority candidates for head coaching and senior football operations positions. And if you're wondering how much of an impact the Rooney Rule has actually had on facilitating greater diversity in football's most prominent leadership roles, consider this. Only 6 of the NFL's 32 teams have a black general manager. Only 4 have a black offensive coordinator. And only 2 have a black head coach, one of whom was only just hired. Meanwhile, the player pool in the NFL is roughly 70% black. And that disparity, as Flores points out in his lawsuit, is the result of discriminatory hiring practices. Anyway, back to the Giants, who eventually hired Brian Daboll, a white man, to be their new head coach. Why does Flores think his interview was a sham? Well, as it happens, he got a text from his old boss, longtime Patriots head coach Bill Belichick, 3 days before his in-person interview was scheduled to happen, informing him that the Giants were going with Daboll. Apparently, Belichick had texted the wrong Brian. Oops, by the way, in their nearly century-long history, the Giants have never had a black head coach. And this wasn't the first time Flores says he went through this song and dance either. According to the lawsuit, Flores says he was put through a sham interview for the Broncos' vacant head coaching position back in 2019. According to Flores, not only did the Broncos brass, including then general manager John Elway, show up an hour late to the interview, but they were also completely disheveled and had clearly been out drinking the night before. Flores quickly deduced that he had only been given an interview to satisfy the Rooney Rule, and the Broncos shortly thereafter named Vic Fangio, a white man, their new head coach. As such, in addition to the unspecified damages he's seeking, Flores also outlined in his lawsuit a host of specific changes he'd like to see implemented by the NFL, which, in his estimation, is managed much like a plantation. These changes include increasing the influence of black individuals in hiring and firing decisions for high-profile football operations positions, and incentivizing the hiring and retention of black GMs, head coaches, and coordinators through monetary or draft pick compensation. Now, in response to Flores' filing, the NFL put out a statement saying the suit is without merit. But Commissioner Roger Goodell later sent out a memo to the league's 32 teams acknowledging that the lack of diversity among football's head coaches is unacceptable. Goodell also promised to review all the league's policies and guidelines relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even noted that he'd bring in outside experts to assist in that process. Ultimately, Flores' lawsuit represents one of the most serious attempts to effect meaningful change in a league still plagued by, to borrow his words, deep-seated institutional racism, one where a barrier to entry still exists for black professionals in leadership. After all, Flores filed this suit at great personal risk, knowing full well what happened to Colin Kaepernick's career when he tried to combat systemic racism. It's also worth noting that Flores didn't land either of the head coaching jobs he was in the mix for in Houston and New Orleans respectively when his suit became public record, though one of those jobs did go to a black man in Lovie Smith. Now, will Flores' suit actually make it to trial? That remains to be seen. The league will likely try to dismiss and adjudicate it through their internal arbitration system. And even if he does make it to court, Flores faces an uphill legal battle against the NFL for a variety of reasons, not the least of which being the NFL is a billion-dollar corporation with endless resources. Still, by simply filing suit, he's helped facilitate a reckoning. And it's possible that in his attempt to take the league to task for discriminatory hiring practices, Brian Flores could have a lasting impact on the fabric of the NFL.